far as who the water belongs to, that's a difficult question for me to answer. But I can certainly say that it doesn't belong to me, and it doesn't belong to my family. Maybe the water belongs to the fish. Maybe the water even belongs to the future.
Tributaries are important to a river because they're just like your arteries, your appendages, arm and leg. They're not a separate entity from the river system. And they're critical, especially in large river systems, because they provide a diversity of other habitat types for invertebrate life or fish life at different seasons. If you think of the river during the wintertime when it's severely icing, it's a hostile environment, or during the big flood events. So fish like the rainbow trout, brown trout, Yellowstone cutthroat trout, mountain whitefish all move out of the river into the tributaries to spawn to rear their young. The young return then to the river when they're old enough to survive in the more difficult conditions presented by the river.
It's vital. The cutthroat trout are genetically programmed to spawn in the tributaries. They must spawn in the tributaries.
A lot of people make the mistake of thinking it's just about a trout, it's just about a target, it's a recreational entity, it's like bowling or something, and it really isn't. It all expresses the health of our earth, right? If we can't be good enough stewards or managers to keep healthy trout populations in our rivers, or healthy rivers, then we're not going to do a very good job of taking care of each other either. And in the long run, our human fate is tied to the fate of trout or ospreys or eagles or otters. It's really no different. We tend to separate ourselves, distance ourselves from the natural world, thinking that we're not part of that anymore. But we are. Our fate is tied to the fate of the rivers.
I think technically we're not quite a desert right here, but without irrigation, this whole place would dry up and blow away.
The West as a whole gets a fraction of the rainfall that the eastern United States gets. We're getting less than 20 inches of rainfall a year. That's hardly enough to really grow crops on. And so without irrigation, most Western ranchers and farmers would not be able to support a living. And in Montana, 97% of our out-of-stream water use is for irrigated agriculture.
It's basically fairly dry. We rarely get more than an inch of rain at a time.
There's such limited precipitation. You rely on almost strictly on snow melt as it comes down the tributaries and the rivers.
It takes a really efficient system to keep enough moisture on the hay to keep it from droughting out without a little help from Mother Nature.
Because of the demand for water, for irrigation, and perpetual drought conditions, there's dozens of streams that are consistently dewatered in our intermountain valleys.
One year when we dried up Big Creek on the 4th of July at the company head gate. Completely dried it up.
We bought a small 5-horsepower pump and put into the stream to try to raise hay a little bit more efficiently out on these fields. The side effect of that was we were then able to suck every last drop out of the stream.
The system of prior appropriation arose out of the early settlers who came to the West. And what they found is in order for landscapes to be productive, in order for people to really make a living off the arid Western landscapes, you had to have a right to water, a water right.
The first homesteaders in here that used the water now have the first right for that water out of those streams.
Let's say they arrived and started ranching and diverting water in 1881. Then everyone who owns that piece of ground up to the present day gets the benefit of that 1881 priority date. Often what makes agricultural land in the arid West, the most productive or the most valuable, is the reliability of getting water to that land.
Because water is so valuable to the individual ranchers, there's probably been more disputes over water than any other thing in this valley. There's no saying around whiskey's for drinking and water's for fighting. Water is the lifeblood of this valley, so people are very protective of those water rights. They're very careful about how they use them, and they're very careful about how their neighbors use them.
We would put some 2x12s in the headgate, basically block off the stream. The stream would then rise a little bit and start flowing down an irrigation ditch. And from there, we would divert the water down lateral ditches and side ditches. We would basically have to divert the entire creek in order to get any manner of flood irrigation going at all. And we had a 90% ditch loss in that length of ditch. People have started using pumps, and that has allowed greater efficiency, greater production, but also it's a more effective weapon in the stream. And if you want to, and you have the water right, you can suck every drop out of a stream.
The first and the oldest water rights are those that get their water first, before other users or the river themselves have any right to that water.
Dewatering streams especially affect Yellowstone cutthroat trout because they spawn in early summer, right after runoff ends. So at the same time that irrigation demand goes up and stream flows are going down, the cutthroat trout are spawning in the tributary streams. Well, when the spawners can get up and spawn in the gravel, that's fine, but then there's no water after that for the young fish to emerge from the gravel and return to the river. There's no reproduction then to continue the life cycle. So when you cut off the tributaries, you're really just cutting off parts of the river that are critical for fish life.
Even if someone doesn't care about trout at all, they should care about water and streams. And that's because streams and rivers are really the lifeblood of the arid West. An intact and healthy aquatic system is the key to a healthy landscape. Without a healthy landscape, you quickly see the quality of human life declining. And so while it seems like a fairly esoteric issue to some people, restoring stream flows, they didn't even know that that was a problem. I, in fact, see it as one of the links to maintaining both a vibrant natural ecosystem, but as well as vibrant and healthy landscapes and communities across the western United States.
Stream flows are important, very critical to the balance of nature here in the valley. You know, we need to keep the open lands, the open spaces, keep the ranches viable to maintain not only the fisheries, but the small mammals, the large mammals that we have. It's really critical. If we lose the open spaces and it goes to subdivision, then a lot of those species of wildlife that we have here in the valley will be disappearing.
Water rights are a property right, and they are a valuable property right to people who rely on them for irrigation, who rely on them for their homes. There's no doubt. But the Montana Constitution also says that the waters of the people belong to the people. And while water right holders have a right to use that water, ultimately the health of our rivers and streams is something that belongs to everyone.
Fridley Creek is a tributary of the Yellowstone, and it starts way up on the Gallatin Range. Then the creek comes down through the mountains and the foothills, and then it comes through the ranch here at Emigrant. When I was a kid, before the drought, there were a few trout in the stream. And then we started getting into some drought cycles. 5 years ago, when I would turn my irrigation pump on and suck that stream dry, I felt sick to my stomach, literally. But I had to do it because we had to grow hay to feed to the cattle the next winter. I wanted to find a way to get the stream reconnected with the Yellowstone. That required two things. We had to physically reconnect the stream to the Yellowstone, number one, and number two, we had to figure out an alternative water source.
He just asked the question, is there any way we can do that? It was a daunting task to think about how to restore that stream on the Murphys' property. because the Murphys diverted almost all of the flow of Fridley Creek to irrigate their fields.
A dewatered stream isn't a lost cause, it just needs water and time.
It was relatively straightforward once we organized the design and raised the money. We changed the Murphys' source of water to groundwater, and they had an artesian source, meaning that that groundwater was coming from very deep underneath the ground. And then we were able to convert, after the high spring flow, all of the Murphys' water right to flow into Fridley Creek. Then they sunk a well, a groundwater well, to a pump, and we replaced the flood irrigation with a sprinkler.
Those are at least 10 times more efficient than the flood irrigation was. Basically, we just flip a switch, the pump that's down in the well turns on and pressurizes the pivots, and the fields are irrigated. Since we got the pivots 2 years ago, the fields are at least 10 times more productive, and we can grow enough forage that we can actually graze cattle up here in the summer, and we never could do that before. Basically, all that I did and all that my family did was ask for help, and that's not really how I was raised. So it took kind of a leap of faith to just say, here's an issue that we need help with. Can you help us? But that's all I did.
And so even though it was complicated to create the design and raise the money and actually carry it out, what we ended up in terms of a restoration was actually pretty simple. Run the creek underneath the canal and connect it to the Yellowstone.
I remember that day I went and looked at it first, and then I came home and got Dad, and then we went over and looked at it. And he was kind of like a kid at the Christmas tree or something. He didn't want to come home. He was just standing there looking at it and looking at it. And then I saw the Fridley Creek running into the Yellowstone for the first time since the 30s. It was just a thrill. It looks like a happy little babbling brook. It was finished exactly when cutthroat spawned. The next spring, Fish, Wildlife, and Parks came back out, and they found baby cutthroats about 1.5 inches long.
When you see a stream recover so quickly, just observing the power of nature to heal itself, it's just reaffirms my faith in nature, in the world, that yeah, things will be okay.
Every day that I'm here on the ranch, I go look at it. Every day, winter and summer. We're only here for an eye blink of history. 1,000 years from now, I really hope the cutthroat are still using that.
Ranching is a way of life, and you need to stop and ponder that. It's a way of life. We don't ranch because we're getting rich, and there's lots of challenges.
Well, the question is, in the future, if water becomes more and more limited and more political, who's going to speak for the fish and wildlife? How are fish and wildlife going to fare in the competition for that limited resource? And I think if the people of Montana or the people of the United States aren't careful, our fish and wildlife and natural resources are what's going to lose.
We're here only as stewards of the land for a little while. The land is here always. And so we're just caretakers during our lifetime. And then it passes on to another generation. So we need to leave this land in some sort of useful manner when we leave.